Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to introduce our President of North America, Brian Demir. Brian has been supporting merchant ambitions for global and domestic payments at Adyen since 2015. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been really engaging talking through these topics. It's my really extreme pleasure to be able to introduce Danny Meyer. Danny Meyer is a New York City restaurateur. He's the founder of Shake Shack as well as the Union Square Hospitality Group. And we're going to be spending the next half an hour or so talking about the hospitality industry under COVID and hitting on a bunch of themes. Danny, let's dive right in. I think, we've been talking a lot over the last year about what COVID means. And I actually think it's more important to now ask ourselves, how is the next year different than the last year was different, right? So let's not spend a bunch of time looking backwards because I think we've all done that enough. What do you think the next year will bring, in particular for the food and beverage and hospitality industry more broadly?
Well, thank you so much, Brian. It's good to see you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to connect with your audience. I'm happy not to look back too much at last year because it's been a tough one. But if anything, it's taught us how much restaurants actually matter and how much they matter to the economy at large in terms of how many people they hire and also to the social fabric of our country. If you think about all the great memories that you've had with friends and business colleagues and family, so many of them take place at restaurants. So I think that we're in for a very, very exciting year ahead. This week, it could be because the weather has finally hit 60 degrees in New York after, nothing but snow and freezing weather. But there's something that feels very hopeful in the air. The number of vaccinations that have been administered, that we're going to come back, the industry is going to come back in a big, big way. And I think the big reason is that people are dying to gather again. People are dying for a three-dimensional opportunity to have real experiences with people, to smell the smells and hear the sounds. And cities and towns all over this country are really ready to come back.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that's really come out in the discussions thus far today is that technology matters, but at the end of the day, the human experience isn't going to go away. And that technology is going to enable those human experiences across these different verticals. That's actually a pretty good segue to, the topic that you talk about a lot in your book and in some of the talks that you've done, this idea of enlightened hospitality. Why don't you sort of give us the 101, what is enlightened hospitality, and how should it frame our thinking?
Well, I'll give you the one-on-one, and I'll try to be as concise as I possibly can. But many, many years ago, back when I had just one restaurant, which was Union Square Cafe, first 10 years of my career, I had just one before opening Gramercy Tavern. And I saw something really interesting happening, which is year after year, when New Yorkers would fill out this thing called the Zagat survey, which was, a long time before we had the internet, that no matter how well our restaurants did when the Zagat survey would ask them, tell us about your food, decor, and service, we would do even better when Zagat would say, now tell us what your favorite 5 restaurants are in New York City. So there came a year when Union Square Cafe was number 2 in the Zagat survey as New York's second favorite restaurant. And yet our food score was only 20th best, our service score was only 12th best, and our decor score was 65th best. And you don't have to be a mathematician to know that 10 plus 12 plus 65 divided by 3 doesn't equal 2. And then the same thing happened with Gramercy Tavern when it opened. And the same thing kept happening with all of our restaurants. And I realized at that point that Zagat had forgotten to ask about a really crucial aspect. It's not just food, decor, and service, but it's hospitality. And I actually called Tim Zagat on the phone and he said, well, we're already asking about service. And I said, well, you are, but service is completely different than hospitality. Service is a great way to describe the technical delivery of the product. And in restaurants, that might be, did we seat you on time for your reservation? Did we get the right food to the right person at the right table, at the right temperature, at the right time? Whereas hospitality has everything to do with how did you make someone feel during that experience of receiving the technical service? So if I were to say, oh my gosh, they got me my salmon cooked medium rare just like I like it, that's good service, but it's not memorable. I expected you to do that. So a long way of saying, we came up with this idea that we were going to name how crucially important hospitality is. And in fact, we were going to come up with a recipe, a simple 2-ingredient recipe that calls for 49 parts performance, how well you do the thing you do, and 51 parts hospitality, how well you make the recipient of your performance feel. And what's great about that, honestly, is that year after year after year, especially as technology has taken hold, and it is so easy to know when someone's doing a good job. It's so easy to copy what someone does. But if you cannot take a picture of it, you cannot copy it. I cannot take a picture of how you make me feel. I can definitely take a picture of a beautiful plate of food, and I can text that to my chef, and he can copy that or she can copy that tomorrow. But I cannot take a picture of a gesture, a thoughtful, by the way, is thinking and feeling together. I can't take a picture of hospitality. Therefore, we determine that hospitality is the element of performance plus emotion that really is going to drive a distance between you and your nearest competitor. So we call Enlightened Hospitality a virtuous cycle where one good thing keeps leading to something even better. And we find that the businesses that understand that far more important than what they do and what they make is how they make their stakeholders feel, beginning with their own employees, and then their customers, and then the community in which they do business, and then their suppliers. All 4 of those stakeholders come up even higher than the shareholder. And we believe that that drives even more shareholder return when you really focus on the inputs. So that's as quickly as I can explain Enlightened Hospitality to you. But I think what I would also add, just very, very briefly, is this, is that in the realm, by the way, I'm trying to prove that I'm in New York City right now. You can hear a couple sirens outside my window. It's the real deal. There are still people here, which is great. But I really think that what you are doing so well is you understand that the best way to use tech is when you can enhance touch. And when you can understand that the best thing that tech can do is to provide convenience, but convenience without experience is nothing. And so what we're all trying to do in our industry and in every industry that you touch is to find that 50-yard line between more convenience and more experience. If it's only one or the other, you're not going to probably win.
Very interesting, Danny, and I think that was an excellent 101 for what it's worth. And I think we can all remember restaurants or stores or what have you that we went to where on a technical basis everything was correct, but it didn't feel human, right? And in fact, I know personally, I'm willing to accept actually imperfections in the execution if I feel I'm having a more human experience, because isn't that at the end of the day the center of hospitality, right? Is this a real set of people interacting with me as a real person? And I think it's extremely insightful. I'm wondering, because we have a broader audience here, ranging from food and beverage to lodging to a lot of retailers. What do you think, for example, the retail industry can learn from the F&B industry? And in particular, what do you think retailers could take from this idea of enlightened hospitality? Maybe some real world examples come to mind.
Well, I think that enlightened hospitality works in any industry. And frankly, I think that the word hospitality, for me, when I was growing up, had basically 3 meanings. It was going to my grandparents for Thanksgiving and Christmas, or it was going to a restaurant, or it was going to a hotel. And I think what people are now realizing is that, as the poet Maya Angelou once said, and I hope I get this right, but she basically said, long after we forget what you did or what you said, we're going to remember how you made us feel. And I know that that's true. If you've ever been to a high school or a college reunion or a family reunion, you'll see someone across the room and you'll be with your spouse, and you'll either go, I really want to go see that person. I used to like them a lot. And your spouse will say, or your partner, your friend will say, why? What did they? I don't know. I just remember liking them. Or the opposite could be, let's walk the other way. And my wife will go, what did they do? I don't know. I just never liked them. So I guess it's a way of saying that whether you're a retailer or a banker or you're in the tech business, you're in the people business, and human beings want to be seen. They want to be recognized. They want to know that you're happy to see them. And I really believe this goes back to a transaction that we all had within moments of being born. And that transaction was we got eye contact, a smile, a hug, and some pretty good food. And if you think about that just for a minute, and you realize that our deepest memories, if you want to go back to Maya Angelou, how someone made us feel, our deepest memories are the ones we never, ever forget. And that transaction was not the kind of the one you were describing where a perfect restaurant gives you perfect food with no soul. You give them money, they give you food. You're not going to remember that. But the one you remember is the one that sees you, the one that's happy to see you, the one that hugs you. And hugging is actually, even if you don't take it literally, if you look at it as a metaphor, hugging is the best metaphor I know for hospitality, because the only way you get one is to give one, right? And every time you give one, you get one back. So you want to know that the person you're dealing with and the person delivering the hospitality is happy as well. Here's a quick example. You asked for a real-time example. I went shopping for some shirts, even in COVID. It's kind of a distance kind of thing. And I can't stand shopping. I just hate it. The person on the giving end picked up on that. They read my sign that said, my invisible sign says, make me feel important. And we're all wearing that invisible sign. Really, really good people can read how big that lettering is. And when I go into a store, the subtitle of my book that says, make me feel important says, by making this as quick and painless as possible. So they brought 3 shirts. They said, I think you would look great in any of these 3, but pick the one you like the best. And I'm going to make this really quick for you. They made it really, really quick for me. And then they took it a step further and they said, before you pay for it, I just want to make sure that your wife likes this shirt because she's one of our best customers and we want to make sure she's happy too. They took a picture of me with the shirt, had her phone number, texted it to her, got the thumbs up. I'm out of the store in way less time than I would be. I go home and my wife feels like a hero. And I feel like, good, this one's going to work. There's just little thoughtful things that can be done at every step of every transaction to take it away from the 49% technical transaction and into the 100% hospitality transaction. It's that extra 51 points that makes all the difference in the world.
Let's get into the next section of the discussion, which is technology and how it enables human interactions like this one, unlike my headphones. And I actually wanted to bridge a little bit and talk about an experience I had that was really similar to yours. And it was with an airline. And I had the fortune in this case, because it was long haul, doing business class. And it was my second time with the airline, only the second time. And the person came up to me and said, Mr. Demir, we remember from our previous discussion that you prefer a Virgin Bloody Mary with a lime, and you prefer the Financial Times and New York Times, so we had these ready for you. And I had this moment of realization that this was a combination of 2 things. It was a CRM, right? It was a complex digital system that the airline was keeping to keep track of me and my preferences. But where it landed was in a human experience. Right, it really felt like that person who was taking care of me was thinking about my needs and my preferences. So I agree completely with your point that it's all about the human experience and the hug, as you say. How do you see technology fitting into that? And in particular, I'm curious as to when you look at your industry overall, what are the technologies that you're starting to see being introduced that are exciting you the most and enabling those human interactions? That it'd be really nice to get your insights on that.
Well, I love your story on the airline, and the technology has existed for quite some time to have a database of guest preferences. It just blows my mind how few companies have used it. I've checked in to a hotel that's part of a big chain, and a great chain in many, many different cities, and it's always blown my mind that they couldn't say, welcome back, Mr. Meyer. Maybe I had not been to that city, but still my loyalty was there. So I love that story from the airline. we've been using that for years and years with platforms like Open Table for many years and then Resi for many years. And what we've been able to do with that kind of technology is to keep all kinds of guest notes, not just for one restaurant, but across all of our restaurants. We have about 13, we soon will once again have about 13 to 15 restaurants right here in New York City. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're allergic to lobster at one of them, you're probably allergic to lobster at all of them. If your birthday is March 14th at one of them, it's probably March 14th at all of them. If you like a corner table at one of them, on and on and on. So I think that it gets back to those 4 transactions that we had right after we were born. Eye contact. I see you. I recognize you. I'm happy to see you. And I want the exchange of pleasure to be mutual, the hug. And that's what technology can do at its very, very best. We're now able to not only recognize all of your preferences, but we can then send a message via Apple Watch to the person who's the captain waiting on your table. And we can even tell that person what your favorite wines are. Now, the key thing is the technology is never going to be any better than the human beings who are actually using it. So the other thing that we do, and this is called this soft technology, but there's the technology of the emotional skills that we hire for. Because you've got to have someone who's got what we call a high HQ, a high hospitality quotient, to be able to take that information. And on one hand, they could ignore it. On another hand, they could use it in a creepy way. Sometimes you don't want someone to say, would you like that same bottle of Bordeaux you had last time? But we hire people who have 6 emotional skills at a very, very high level. And together, when we have those 6 emotional skills at a high level, we know that we've got someone on our team who's got a high HQ. And someone with a high HQ is motivated primarily because they put themselves in your shoes, they have empathy, and they want you to leave there feeling better than you felt before you had that transaction with them.
That's very interesting. I'm curious as to how you see this question of HQ and having people with high HQ who know how to use technology. How do you scale that, right? You're one of the founders of Shake Shack, which is a company that's gone public and has many thousands of associates, right? I think a fine dining setting is quite a bit different than that, and I think we have a lot of people in the audience who are working for very large brands. So, how do you think they should look at this question of HQ? And whether or not their associates across these scaled organizations can handle the complexity of turning digital things into human experiences?
It starts with caring. It starts with saying the reason that we exist is to make people feel better. And the reason that our technology is applicable to what we do is that we think that high tech can make high touch happen all the more. So you asked a question, Brian, that I think about all the time, which is how do you scale culture? And I'm in an industry famous for somebody who did probably more to scale systems of performance than anyone has in our industry. That was Ray Kroc. It's not an easy thing that the French fries are going to taste exactly the same in Moscow as they do in Montana. I never knew him, but I don't think he spent a lot of his time thinking about how to scale culture, how the experience felt. In other words, I can promise you that if I go to a McDonald's in any of 50 cities, it's going to feel different. Well, we are just consumed with trying to scale the culture of hospitality. And frankly, the 2 ways to do it are through common language, because language is the mortar between the bricks of culture. And if you think about any culture in the world, whether it's your family or whether it's your fraternity or sorority or your organized religion or whatever, there's a common language. Families have nicknames, they have shortcut ways. And what that language does is it brings people together because you have a shorthand way of saying, people like us do things like this. That's what culture is. And the question is, if you can have a common language that you reinforce in your company and that you promote people both with raises and with new professional growth opportunities who are your culture carriers, where so many other companies really are promoting people who are the top performers. Remember, I don't want a 49% on my test, and I don't want a 51% on my test. I want 100 on my test. But we live in a time when, because culture is harder to measure than performance, which is true, that so many of the people who get raises and professional advancement are the 49 percenters, but they didn't put the whole thing together. And so I stopped asking myself, there was a question I asked myself every year for at least 10 years, which is, how can we prevent our growth from diluting our culture? And now I basically said, excuse me, that's the wrong question to be asking. The right question is, how can we use our growth to advance our culture? And the way you use your growth to advance your culture is that you just make dead sure that anyone who's getting a promotion is someone who, in addition to being really good at what they do, is the best person for your culture. Because everyone in an organization is expert at watching who got the raise and who got the promotion. And they take note. And the minute you veer from that, and we've all done this, where you go, well, I got to make Johnny the sous chef because he's the best line cook. Well, guess what? If Johnny's not great for our culture, he is going to undermine everything I've ever said about what matters to how we do things around here. So language, and then acting to promote the right people. And frankly, and this is a big, hard lesson I've learned through the years, is who gets exited from the organization also matters. People notice that. And when you exit the people who are hurting your culture and you promote the people who are helping your culture, and you do both of those things consistently, you're then using your growth to advance your culture.
Those are some really resonating themes, Danny. And so actually, they resonate with me very personally. My team here in North America, we've grown 30% just in the last year. In fact, I was looking at the numbers, and a third of us came on board during COVID, right? And we've been asking ourselves that question of like, how do we keep our culture, and how do we make sure that everybody on the team have a multiplier effect around themselves? And I think going back to the tactical point, because I think there's going to be a lot of folks here in the audience who are more on the technology side trying to bring it into the company, right? Whether it's to the associates or more broadly. And I think your theme really, really resonates with me, which is you need to ask yourself what environment it's going into and what the culture is of the recipients of that technology. And then you really ask yourself how it's going to intersect, because you can have all the best technology in the world. Let's use the CRM at the airline as an example. But if it doesn't land in a culture that's going to use it in the right way, well, that's only, I guess, 49% of the equation, as you would say.
Right. And
Imagine
imagine giving me the most technologically advanced automobile, but I don't know how to drive it. It's lost on me. So you really need the automobile and, excuse me, you need the airplane and the pilot.
Absolutely, agreed completely. As we're rounding out, and if folks have questions, they're being sent to me, so feel free to put them in the chat. I'm wondering very briefly, I mean, how do you see payments then? Where does payments fit into everything? I think some in earlier sessions talked about sort of the Uberification of payments, which is this idea that it should just simply go away. I'm wondering if you would agree with that standpoint, or if you would have a different perspective in your industry, especially as technologies change and how payments change. Where do you want to see it trending?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. And something that I've been actually talking about probably for 5 years at least, way, way before there was COVID, is that there are various pain points in the restaurant experience that just don't have to be there. Nobody has ever loved trying to wave down and find their server when they're ready to pay. And by the way, no server has ever loved trying to be a mind reader and guess when you are ready to pay. We've all seen the story where the server comes up to the table because they think you're ready to pay, and then they get waved away, and the the host of the table may even be offended that the server's trying to rush them out, which was never the case. So why not get rid of that not only awkward moment, but potentially 10 or 15 minutes of wasted time that doesn't serve the guest, and it certainly doesn't serve the restaurant that's trying to turn a table. So I absolutely agree that we should have, the same exact experience that you would get when you leave a ride sharing car, which is you just get up and leave when you're ready to leave, and technology can handle that. We already have all the technology to do that. And what's great is that we even have technology so that if 4 people are out to dinner and they want to split the bill, or they want to leave a tip after the fact, they can do that. And I could not agree more. Another one that I think about all the time, there's another pain point, especially if you're from a colder climate as we are here in New York, where, for at least 5 months a year, we have coat check season. Who in the world likes fumbling in their pocket for a piece of plastic that somebody else has touched? And it's something about coat check tickets. They get lost almost like socks in a dryer get lost. But wouldn't it be a great thing if we could use technology? When I paid my bill, where my coat is. So that should trigger somebody to fetch my coat and have it waiting for me at the front door, or bring it to me at my table, so that we don't have to waste another 10 minutes in a very, very busy restaurant, getting in line once again to get your coat. So we're just trying to think about all the many, many ways that technology can help save me time, make it more convenient, and make me feel more recognized and appreciated.
Absolutely. I think of the best experiences I've had in restaurants, and I think that example is great, right? Of you head towards the front door, and magically the host or maitre d' is holding your coat. And right now, I'm quite convinced it comes down to them being really great at their job and keeping sort of track in the restaurant of like who's getting up from their tables and whatnot. But to your point, what if technology could enable that? And I think that's going to be how restaurants change going forward, not technology in place of human experiences, but technology enabling human experiences. So
Could not
as
agree
we round
more.
out here, last question for you, Danny. Most of the people in the audience here are enabling technology, as I think we've talked about quite a bit. What advice would you give them if you were to leave them with one theme? They're agents of change around digital enablement and within their organizations. What would you suggest of them if you were to just leave them with one point today?
Well, I'm not sure how this is going to land, but sometimes technology gets the best of itself and it makes life more complicated. I think we've all had experiences. I know I have with technologically advanced lighting systems in our restaurants, for example. And it just makes you have to program so many things in it that it makes me miss the days when we just had a louver that went up and down so you could set the scene. We've all had experiences even in hotel rooms where you can't even figure out how the lighting system works, or you can't figure out how the audio system works. In restaurants they're very, very busy places, and no one who works in a restaurant would rather spend their time, with 5 screens in their face than spending time with the guest with a face-to-face contact. That's why we all got into this business. We all got in because we like making people feel good, and we can't do that in our office. So when you present us with tech of any type, it should be tech that actually simplifies our lives and gives us even more time to spend with people, because that's how we end up providing the best possible customer and guest experience. Think about that. Think about anything you do that saves us time and provides us with tools to recognize more people and to customize more experiences. And I'll leave you with that thought, which is that if you think about the 49% performance as off the rack, this is how we do the thing for everybody. And if you think about hospitality as a custom fit suit, this is how we do it for you specifically. Any kind of technology that can help us turn the off the rack into a customized hospitality experience and doesn't, take more time than it's worth, we're going to be excited to hear about that.
That's fantastic, Danny, and I couldn't agree more. We're a technology provider at the end of the day at Adyen, but we strongly believe that our technology is enabling human experiences. So I think this was great. Thank you for joining us and for bringing us so much insight from your experience.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to give a few points. And I think, we call this event Now and Next. And the whole point of that is to talk about what are we dealing with today and what does it tell us about the future? And, we would be remiss if we didn't note COVID. And it's been talked about throughout today. And COVID-19 has been a tremendous tragedy on a human scale. The very real reality is that it's causing change. It's causing change in terms of how consumers think and interact and act. And because of that, it's changing our businesses. I think what we're finding during these times is that digitally native merchants, merchants that really started as digital companies are really thriving. And the nimble companies that are adapting to that are thriving as well. And what this is causing is digital transformation within organizations. And we think that payments, and in particular Adyen, have a big part to play in that transformation. But I think very importantly, and I think the theme was really touched on quite a bit in the last talk here with Danny, is that the human element does not go away. Technology is here to enable those experiences. Consumers will still want to go to stores. But if COVID has taught us anything, it's that they're actually more likely to do that now every once in a while versus having digital enablement via e-commerce and other flows. And I think it's going to be a balance. And because it's going to be a balance, it's all the more reason to embrace unified commerce. Because now consumers used to be sort of in a particular lane. You were sort of, you were a millennial who would always go online, or you were a baby boomer who would only go in store. And in our speculation going forward, as we exit out of COVID and look to a hopeful future, is that an entire new cohort of consumers has been trained to really do what they want in the moment, right? And I think because of that, unified commerce is going to be even more important. We're going to need to be able to identify the same customer across channels and seamlessly give them that great experience, recognize that behavior across those channels, and reward them for their loyalty. And I was really glad to hear, Danny talking about, well, then how do you do that? And how do you recognize that loyalty? And that's that question of HQ and bringing to the forefront the human experience in that. In all of this, we know that the payment provider isn't the only question that you have around digital enablement and unified commerce in general. You've got CRM, which we talked about, ERP, inventory management systems, point of sale, e-commerce systems, as well as your payment provider. Our goal at Adyen is to really never be the blocker in that. And in fact, we want to be the tip of the spear as you build out these unified commerce journeys. And that's really our goal. So going forward, we would encourage a discussion. Talk to us about how you are changing your company and how your consumers are changing their behavior as well. And we're here to bring the knowledge that we have of enabling unified commerce across our merchant base to you and to your organization. So as we exit the formal part of the agenda today, I would encourage everybody to check out the Payment Pros section. We have multiple folks from the payments industry and the Adyen side that are really happy to just talk about whatever you're dealing with. You can go in there, pop something into the chat, and in fact, you're able to have a one-on-one video conference then with a Payment Pro. So from there, I would just like to thank everybody for joining. We know you have a really busy schedule. We hope that the themes that we touched on today were enlightening and inspiring. And I'd also like to thank everybody who gave up their time to be part of this event and lend their thinking. So from there, Emily, take it away to close us out.
Thanks, Brian. We've got a lot of work ahead of us for 2021, but with the lessons of last year, it looks like we have a head start. And thank you everyone for attending today's event. I hope you all enjoyed your time and got some valuable info to apply to your own business. Just a few more notes before I sign off. First, if you didn't get the chance to speak to a payment pro and you'd like to, the chat is open for the next 30 minutes, so feel free to reach out. Second, we'll be sending an email on Monday with a short survey. Please complete the survey to help us help you have the best experience possible at these events. As a way to say thank you, we'll be donating to Feeding America for every response received. Finally, look out for a recording of today's event, which we'll be sharing soon. Thanks again, and have an amazing day.